We don't need you anymore. Strangers should just express their condolences and leave. With no regard for the onlookers, my mother-in-law yelled, "Today is the funeral of my recently deceased father-in-law." This woman, who typically tormented me, took this opportunity to let loose on me more than ever. How can she treat anyone like this with no hesitation? I was the one taking care of my father-in-law. As I struggled to contain my annoyance with my father-in-law, my husband, who was nearby, opens his mouth. "You're right. Strangers are just a nuisance." With that, he steps in front of his mother. My name is Michelle Shore, 30 years old. I married my husband 2 years ago and currently live with him and his parents. My husband's name is Mike, also 30. We initially lived in an apartment, just the two of us, after getting married. However, it seemed my husband was an only child and had been quite adored by his mother. The calls from his mother were frequent, sometimes several times a day, even after our marriage. "Mike, when will you come to live with me? I don't mind if it's just you. Please come back. I'm lonely. You know, the greatest form of giving back to your parents is to just be with them." She would constantly beg for us to live with her like this. My husband didn't take it seriously and certainly had no intention of moving in with her. But one day, his father came to see us. "Mike, Michelle, could you consider living with us?" At this unexpected proposal, Mike asked with a troubled face, "What's this all about, Dad? You and Mom, you're both healthy. There's no need for us to live together, is there? We are physically well, but it's still rough at times for me, mentally. I may have reached my limit living alone with your mother." "What do you mean, Dad?" "Well," after hearing the full story from his father, it seemed that ever since Mike had moved out, his mother's behavior had been progressively getting worse. She would verbally abuse his father and withdraw money from the bank without even asking. When they checked the balance of the bank account they had been saving for their retirement, after a few months, it appeared that she had spent as much as $10,000 without even asking. When confronted, his mother readily confessed, but showed no remorse. What's worse, she had no intention of returning the money, and started complaining that the house has become uncomfortable since Mike left. Having reached his limits, his father made her swear on a written agreement that if she committed any more misdeeds, he would divorce her. Since then, there had been no abusive words or unauthorized spending, but the relationship between the two had not improved, and a cold war continued in their home. That's why his father was asking us to live with them, even for a short while, to ease the tension in their house. That night, my husband and I decided to discuss living with them. He seemed to think that I would be against it, and began by saying, "I understand Dad's feelings, but Michelle, you'd be troubled if we suddenly had to live with them, wouldn't you?" But it's true that your father is having a hard time, right? If there's something we can do, we should do it, shouldn't we? But wouldn't that be hard on you? I'll be fine. Besides, your father is the one who will suffer if we don't do something. We have to help him as soon as possible." Yeah, you're right. Thanks, Michelle. I'll talk to Dad about moving in with them." And thus, we as a couple decided to move in with my in-laws. My husband and my father-in-law came to an agreement, and our new life started immediately the next month. My husband Mike always noticed my changes, and was someone I could rely on when things got tough. My father-in-law, too, had a good relationship with us ever since our first meeting during our engagement. However, the one thing that concerned me was my mother-in-law. As I mentioned earlier, she doted on her son Mike, incredibly. When we went to meet them for our engagement, she only talked to Mike and completely ignored me. Even after we got married and visited their house a few times, she only talked to Mike. When she did talk to me, it was the bare minimum, and she made it very clear that she didn't enjoy our conversations. It wasn't that I had a bad relationship with her, I just personally found her difficult. However, since moving in, she was always happy because she got to live with Mike. So we didn't have any major issues, even though she never really talked to me. One day, after about a year of living together, an incident broke out, and it turned our life upside down. I got a phone call while I was at my part-time job. It was from Mike, who should have been at work too. "Michelle, listen carefully," he said. "It seems that Dad has collapsed and been taken to the hospital by an ambulance." "What? Dad?" I replied. "I'm leaving work now and heading to the hospital. What about you, Michelle?" "Of course, I'm coming too. I'll talk to my manager right now. Okay, let me know when you get to the hospital. I hurried to the hospital and met up with Mike. When we got to my father-in-law's room, he was lying in bed, but turned to us and spoke. Sorry for making you worry, he said with a smile, which gave us a bit of relief. But then I noticed something odd. I looked around and timidly asked him, Dad? Where is Mom? Oh, her. She's at home. Home? Why? I collapsed at home. She didn't even bother to call an ambulance. I had to call them myself. So, she didn't even ride with you in the ambulance? That's right. But don't worry about it. Oh, Dad. The shocking revelation left us speechless. Not only me, but Mike too was turning red with rage. Thankfully, my father-in-law recovered and was able to be discharged after a few days. However, he was diagnosed with advanced cancer, and the collapse had left him with severe paralysis throughout his body, leaving him unable to live alone. The doctor informed us that he needed full-time care, and we were at a loss for words. When Mike relayed this to his mother, she let out a heavy sigh. She acted as if she was being inconvenienced, but Mike and I managed to persuade her, and we all decided to work together to take care of my father-in-law. Mike made a good earning, so I quit my part-time job to dedicate myself to caregiving and house chores. Ever since then, my life centered around caregiving. While it was challenging to adjust to something new, my father-in-law always wore a smile and thanked me, saying, "Thank you." When Mike got home from work, he would take over the caregiving responsibilities. This allowed me to finish preparing dinner and take a bath while enjoying a brief period of freedom. We were living each day in this cycle, making it possible for me to continue providing care without overburdening myself. That being said, it wasn't all smooth sailing. When Mike left for work, my mother-in-law wouldn't lift a finger to help. Moreover, she would become irritated when I was busy caring for my father-in-law and couldn't handle all the housework. One day, unable to bear the situation any longer, I confronted her directly. Mother-in-law, could you maybe help out a bit more? I asked. What? Why all of a sudden? You're so full of yourself, she responded. If you don't want to take care of my father-in-law, I'll do it. Could you at least help out a little with the household chores in return? Shut up! You're only our daughter-in-law. The housework is your job. And of course, so is taking care of him. Wait a minute. We've talked about doing our best to help each other out. You decided that on your own, didn't you? Don't drag me into that. I just wish he would die already. I need the inheritance money. Hold on. How could you say such a thing? Your husband is still... Enough! You're a stranger to begin with. The conversation ended with my mother-in-law calling me disrespectful and leaving. I asked her for help a few more times, but to no avail. I also talked to Mike about it, and he tried to talk to her, but she would always play the victim, making it impossible to have a meaningful discussion. To make matters worse, Mike had to transfer. Upon hearing the news, my mother-in-law gleefully suggested, "Let's put him in a nursing home." But nursing homes are expensive, and she's not working. Given that my father-in-law is physically disabled but still mentally well, is there really a need to put him in a home? After thinking it over many times, I decided to stay behind and continue taking care of my father-in-law. Initially, my mother-in-law made her displeasure quite obvious, but I didn't let that get to me. Despite Mike's concerns, I stood firm in my decision. However, what I didn't realize was how this choice would bring me so much distress. A few months had passed since Mike had started his new assignment elsewhere. On this day, I was going to meet a close friend who lived far away, but was visiting town. I had previously informed my in-laws about this and had arranged for my mother-in-law to take care of my father-in-law for the day. However, just as I was getting ready to leave, my mother-in-law came into my room without knocking and said, "Michelle, I'm going shopping with a friend right now. Could you please take care of the house and him?" Wait, what? I thought I made it clear that you were supposed to take care of my father-in-law today, since I'm meeting up with my friend. Oh, is it? I don't remember. That's so unfair. I've told you days before. You're so annoying. I don't know anything about this. Just be grateful that I'm letting you live here, rent-free. But I was really looking forward to meeting my friend after so long. Even a fool like you has a best friend, huh? Birds of a feather flock together. Don't worry, you'll meet them again soon enough. Well, good luck. My mother-in-law hastily left through the door. I broke down crying. Why? Why is it always me? I do the housework and take care of Mike's father every day. Isn't it okay to go out for just one day? This is too much. Just because you hate me. This is too much! A mix of unplaced anger and emptiness overwhelmed me, making it hard to recover. But now that my mother-in-law was out, I had things to do. I wiped away my tears, texted my best friend about what had happened, and got back to the household chores. I prepared the meal for the elderly care and headed towards Mike's father's room. When I knocked and entered the room, Mike's father called out with a serious look. "Michelle, my father-in-law, what's the matter?" "I'm sorry. Because of my wife, your plans got ruined." "Huh? Did you hear that earlier?" My father-in-law slowly nodded. Then he pulled something out of the drawer next to his bed and handed it to me. "My father-in-law, this is... Could you do me a favor in my stead?" "But, are you sure?" "Yes, I am. It's something I've decided a little while ago." Saying that, he pulled out a voice recorder from under his pillow. When the play button was pressed, an unbelievable voice came out. After hearing everything, I promised to fulfill my father-in-law's wish and went to this one place on a later date. But that was the last thing I was able to do for my father-in-law. 2 weeks later, my father-in-law's condition suddenly worsened in the middle of the night. Even though he was rushed to the hospital by ambulance, it was too late, and he passed away. My husband, who hurried back from out of state, was not able to be there at the end. "Father-in-law, what's the matter?" My mother-in-law, who always claimed it was too much of a hassle, left all the arrangements for the wake and funeral to my husband. We held a simple wake, just with our close family members, and then the day of the funeral arrived. My father-in-law had started his own company when he was alive and continued to work until the day he collapsed, though he had an extensive network. A large number of people attended the funeral, all showing tears for my father-in-law's death. I exchanged greetings with my father-in-law's acquaintances and waited for the funeral to start. Then my father-in-law, who had been sitting on a chair at the edge, approached me with determination. "Michelle, how long do you plan on staying here?" "Huh?" "Not huh? Now that his care is done, there's no need for you to be here anymore." "Wait, mother-in-law, what are you saying?" "We don't need you anymore. Strangers should just send their condolences and leave." Without caring about the surrounding eyes, my mother-in-law spit out these words as if making fun of me. At her loud voice, the surrounding people started to murmur. My mother-in-law reached out her hand to me and smirked. "Leave your condolence gift and go." At that moment, I felt my blood rush to my head. Who does she think she is? Just leave your condolence gift? We don't need you? This is no joke. How much do you need to insult me to be satisfied? I stepped closer, about to give my mother-in-law a piece of my mind, but the person standing in my way was none other than my husband, Mike. Slowly, with a hard stare at his mother, he began to speak. "That's right, Mom. Strangers are a nuisance." "My dear son, you think the same, right, Mike?" "Yeah, I do. So, could you please leave, Mom? You're not my mother anymore. Just take your stuff and go." "What? Mike, what are you—" Desperately clinging to her son, my mother-in-law's face tightens into a forced smile. Her voice trembles, her disturbance clearly visible. Mike turns to me, trying to convey something. Understanding his intention, I explain the situation to my mother-in-law. "Mother-in-law? No! Margaret, please, leave immediately." What did you just say? In your position as a daughter-in-law? I'm no longer your daughter-in-law. I'm a complete stranger. What are you talking about? You're not planning to steal that man's inheritance, are you? You've conspired with him and Mike to do this. No way! All of that man's inheritance is mine! No, it's not anything like that. After all, you're not getting a single penny of the inheritance. With the facts laid out clearly, my mother-in-law stares at me, wide-eyed. For some reason, she grabs my collar and raises her voice. Don't mess with me! Always saying whatever you want. I don't want you deciding the distribution of that man's inheritance. It's your husband's will. Oh, really? And? I don't care about his will. As his wife, I'm guaranteed a share of the inheritance. You won't get it. After all, you're divorced from my father-in-law. What? Yes, my mother-in-law is already divorced from my father-in-law, and I was the one who submitted the divorce papers. That day, my father-in-law showed me his divorce papers. Previously, he had made a pact saying, "The next time you commit a misdeed, we'll get a divorce." Out of precaution, he had apparently made my mother-in-law sign the divorce papers. She continued to torment me, even ruining my plans with my best friend. When my father-in-law found out, he was as furious as if it had happened to him. On top of that, she secretly entered my father-in-law's room to steal money, showering him with horrible words like, "Die already! Just pass on and leave the inheritance," etc. These cruel words were recorded by a voice recorder that my father-in-law had hidden by his bedside. Once I finished explaining all of this, the color drained from my mother-in-law's face. In front of her, Mike presented the divorce certification. To my mother-in-law, who was left speechless, I said one last cold sentence. Do you understand? You were long since abandoned by my father-in-law. It's just horrible that you trampled over the feelings of such a kind man. Wait a minute! Without his inheritance, how will I live? You've got to be kidding. Someone as lowly as you have no right to inherit the legacy left by my father-in-law. You should be thankful you've been able to live freely until now. From now on, you'll live a lonely life on a meager social security check. I'll never help you. I hope you suffer more than my father-in-law did when he was sick, and struggle to survive. With these words, my former mother-in-law left, crying. The funeral commenced shortly after, but she never returned. After the funeral, I returned home, but she was nowhere to be found. I packed my belongings and moved to my husband's place. Since we deleted my former mother-in-law's number, we have no idea what kind of life she's living now. Even if she were in trouble, we would not help her. Of course, we have no intention of seeing her either. After the move, Mike and I bought a small Christian shrine and decided to place a picture of his father. I started looking for part-time work nearby, and we returned to our dual-income lifestyle. It's busy, but quite fulfilling. Bye, Dad. I'm off now, Mike said. I'm leaving too, father-in-law, I also said, and left. Every morning, we do this, paying respects to the picture of Mike's father before we head to work. It seems like the man in the photo is smiling back at us.